Here's the conversation I couldn't figure out how to start. I've spent 2 decades helping Fortune 500 companies build emergency response plans. I've sat in boardrooms with C-suite executives and walked them through worst-case scenarios without flinching. But sitting down with my own parents to talk about what would happen if the power went out for a week, that was harder. Not because the material is complicated, because the relationship is. You're not their risk manager, you're their kid. And no matter how old you are, that dynamic doesn't disappear at the kitchen table. Today, I'm going to give you a framework for having this conversation, the one most of us keep putting off, without triggering defensiveness, without sounding like you've been watching too many doomsday documentaries, and without damaging the relationship in the process. Because getting this conversation right matters more than any supply kit. In corporate continuity planning, we have a concept called stakeholder communication strategy. Before you roll out any emergency plan, you don't just hand people a binder and walk away. You think carefully about who you're talking to, what their concerns are, and how to frame the conversation so they actually engage with it rather than shut down. Your parents are stakeholders, arguably your most important ones. And the mistake most of us make, I made it too, is walking in with the binder before we've done the stakeholder work. So let's fix that. First, let's understand why these conversations go sideways, because it's rarely about the content, it's about the subtext. When you sit down with your parents and start talking about emergency supplies and backup plans, here's what they often hear underneath the words, "We don't think you can handle this," or worse, "We're worried you're getting too old to take care of yourselves." That's a loaded message, and it doesn't matter if you didn't mean it that way. If that's what lands, the conversation is over before it starts. Think about it from their side. Your parents grew up in the 50s and 60s. These are people who remember actual scarcity, who lived through power outages, blizzards, and recessions without a smartphone or an Amazon Prime subscription. They changed their own tires. They kept a chest freezer full of food. They already had a version of preparedness baked into their daily lives. They just didn't call it that. So when you show up with your emergency checklist, there's a decent chance they're quietly thinking, "I was handling this before you were born, kid." Your job isn't to educate them. Your job is to collaborate with them. Here's a language shift that changes everything. Don't frame it as, "We need to make sure you're prepared." Frame it as, "I've been updating my own emergency plan, and I realized I don't know what yours looks like. Can we compare notes?" That one reframe does 3 things. It positions you as a peer, not a parent to your parent. It acknowledges that they probably have a plan, even if it's informal. And it opens a 2-way conversation instead of a 1-way presentation. In my professional world, we call this co-creation. When you involve people in building the plan instead of handing them a finished document, you get buy-in. The same principle works at the kitchen table. Some other language that tends to land well. Instead of, "What would you do if something happened?" Try, "I've been thinking about what our family's communication plan looks like. Can we walk through it together?" Instead of, "You really should have a go bag." Try, "I put together a document kit last month, and it made me realize I didn't have half of your key documents. Can we fix that?" Instead of, "What if you had to evacuate?" Try, "Where would you go if you needed to get out of the house for a few days? I want to make sure I know that." The goal is the same. The framing is completely different, and framing is everything. Now let's get practical. When I work with a corporate client on a continuity plan, there are 4 core questions I need answered before anything else. They translate perfectly to this conversation. 1. What's their communication plan? If there's a regional emergency, a hurricane, a major ice storm, a grid outage, where will they be? And how will you reach them? Do you have a secondary contact if cell service is down? Is there a neighbor or a local friend who checks on them? This isn't morbid, this is just logistics, and it's a completely reasonable thing to want to know. 2. What are their medical dependencies? This one matters enormously and gets skipped all the time. If your parent takes daily medication, blood pressure, diabetes, cardiac, what happens if they can't get to a pharmacy for 5 days? Do they have a buffer supply? Does their doctor know to write a slightly larger prescription for that reason? I've watched companies lose critical operations because a key employee had a medical situation no one had planned for. Don't let that be your family. 3. What does their financial resilience look like? Not their net worth, their liquidity in a disruption. Do they have a small amount of cash accessible if ATMs are down? Do they know how to access their accounts if online banking is interrupted? Is their insurance documentation somewhere findable? Again, peer conversation, not an audit. I realized I didn't have my own insurance docs in one place. Do you? 4. What's their home's functional baseline? How long can they shelter comfortably if they lose power? Do they have a way to stay warm, light, and fed for 72 hours without the grid? Not bunker-level supplies. Basic functional resilience. Most households that do this well already have most of it. They just haven't inventoried it. Walk through these 4 questions across 2 or 3 relaxed conversations, not in one sitting, not as a formal agenda, just work them in. I want to be direct about something for a second. For some of us, this conversation isn't just about emergency kits. It's the beginning of a longer set of discussions about aging, independence, and what happens as our parents get older. And that's genuinely hard territory to navigate. If that's where you are, the preparedness angle is actually a decent entry point, because it's concrete, it's practical, and it doesn't carry the emotional weight of, "I'm worried about your future." You're talking about documents and flashlights, not decline. But be honest with yourself about what you're really trying to accomplish, because if this is the beginning of a larger conversation about living arrangements, driving, medical decisions, those deserve their own conversations, done carefully, with patience. Preparedness planning is a good first step, not a substitute for the harder work. So here's your framework. Come in as a collaborator, not a planner. Use the co-creation language. Work through the 4 core questions: communication, medical, financial, and household baseline, across a few natural conversations. And give them credit. Your parents survived plenty before you showed up with a checklist. This isn't about rescuing them. It's about making sure your family has a shared plan that everyone's actually heard of. Your homework this week: have the first 5 minutes of this conversation, just the reframe. I've been working on my own emergency plan and realized I don't know what yours looks like. Can we compare notes? That's it. That's the whole assignment. Get the free download. The 4-question family preparedness conversation card. A 1-page cheat sheet with the exact questions to ask, the language that works, and the phrases to avoid. Consumable in 5 minutes. Built for real family conversations, not doomsday drills. Link in description. Next video, I'm walking through what actually goes into a household communication plan. The document your whole family needs and almost no one has. We'll build it from scratch. And if the financial resilience piece raised some questions, like what a real emergency fund actually looks like, not just the cash in a box version, I cover that over on 50 Cents of Advice. Link in the description. I'm Ernie. This is Prepared, not Paranoid. Build the plan, skip the panic.